Today we're going to talk about the female reproductive structure in an angiosperm, that is a flowering plant. And we'll compare the structures and the processes with the alternations of generations. My biggest tip would just be to get the big picture. So first of all, the female reproductive structure in an angiosperm is the carpel. And the carpel is also the sporophyll. So what is a sporophyll in an alternation of generations? A sporophyll is typically the leaf that contains a spore-producing organ called the sporangia. So then the carpel contains the stigma, which receives the pollen, the style, and the ovule. So the ovule is surrounded, protected by the ovary. The ovule will later become the seed, while the ovary later becomes a fruit. Now inside the ovule are two integuments, which is for protection. And by the way, in gymnosperms, which is also a sea plant, there is only one integument, whereas in angiosperm here, there's two integuments. And all of this inside the ovule is diploid. Inside the integument is a sporangium, which contains a sporocyte. A sporangium, according to alternation of generations, is the same as sporangia. It's just a question of singular and plural. So the sporangia is a spore-producing organ. But then what is a sporocyte? The sporocyte is a spore-producing cell. So what you can say is the sporocyte, the spore-producing cell, is inside the sporangia, the spore-producing organ, which is on the underside of the sporophyll, which is the modified leaf. And all of this is in the sporophyte, the full-grown diploid plant. So that makes sense that our sporangia, will eventually contain the sporocyte. It contains a sporocyte, which later undergoes meiosis to form megaspores or spore. So they can also say this is a megasporangium, a megasporocyte, megasporophyll, megaspore. Mega just means it's female. So the spore-producing cell, the sporocyte, will undergo meiosis to form 4 megaspores, but only one survives. The megaspore will divide and form a gametophyte. This gametophyte only has 7 cells. I made 7 dots in here. So this gametophyte contains 7 cells. It's a 7-cell female gametophyte that contains one large central cell. And inside that large central cell, there are 2 nuclei, which we call the polar nuclei. And by the way, the 7-celled female gametophyte is also called the embryo sac. So if the question asks you, what is the embryo sac in the alternation of generations? The embryo sac is the gametophyte phase for the female angiosperm. Okay, so what's the deal with this polar nuclei? So when pollen double fertilizes, that means both of the sperm goes in. One sperm will fertilize the egg, obviously making a zygote, diploid, while the other sperm will actually combine with this polar nuclei, with these 2 polar nuclei, and form a triploid cell, which will become 3N. So the triploid cell will later become a triploid endosperm, a tissue that's rich in nutrients and nourishes the developing embryo. So one sperm fertilizes a zygote, the other one fuses with the polar nuclei to make a triploid cell endosperm that becomes a really important tissue in developing the seed for nutrients. And if this video was helpful, make sure to drop a like.